Welcome. I hope you are having a wonderful night. Tonight, I will be telling some terrifyingly scary stories. Make sure to leave your feedback on the comments so I can make this the best experience for you. I hope you are warm and ready. Let's begin. This was quite a while ago, when I was around 8 or 9 years old. My sister and her boyfriend, who were both in their early 20s, decided to walk to the convenience store. I wanted to come along, so we set out on foot. The store was less than 500 meters away, and it was around 7 or 8 p.m., so it was already dark outside. As we were walking, we reached a point where we had to take a left turn to get to the store. However, my sister's boyfriend decided to cut the corner and walk through a nearby playground. The playground was poorly lit, and my sister and I were too scared to follow him through the darkness. As we continued walking, I noticed a short figure emerging from a small tree and starting to follow my sister's boyfriend. At first, I thought I was just seeing things, but then my sister yelled out to her boyfriend, causing him to turn around and see the figure as well. He immediately sprinted away, and the figure slowly retreated back to the tree it had come from. We were all shaken up by the encounter, but we still went to the convenience store. On the way back home, we took a different path to avoid the playground. Looking back on the experience, it's hard to say what the figure could have been. It could have been a real person, or it could have just been a shadow. Regardless, it was a scary encounter that we were lucky to escape from unharmed. Since then, I haven't had any other scary encounters like that. Till this day, I don't know what that figure was and what it was doing. So this is another one of my experiences from working as an overnight security guard at the local port. If you all want more context on the setting, my other story is on this subreddit under the name Traumatizing Night Shift. For those of you that know the setting already, this is another experience that scared the absolute shit out of me. This did not happen to me firsthand since it happened to one of my coworkers, but since that incident happened during my shift, I would fear to even go use the restroom alone. So just to recap on the setting, the local port has a radius of nearly 2 miles, and there are 3 overnight security guards on the shift, including me. We were all at the front gate post, and it's about the size of a trailer home. The front gate post is separated from everything else in the site. Buildings, slabs, offices, the oil rigs, everything. It's the entry point to the entire industrial park. The offices and restrooms are about walking distance from our post, and it's really dark since there wasn't really any illumination. Light. Around 2, the lieutenant walked out of the post to go use the restroom. The restrooms are deep in the center of the offices. The offices carry a very creepy vibe because they were constructed around the 1950s. So the wooden floorboards and walls were still the style there. About 7 minutes later, me and Mike look out of the post window to find our lieutenant sprinting back to the post. At first, we thought it was hilarious since he's a chubby dude, so we found it funny watching him run. Then, a realization started to kick in. The lieutenant was the one who let out the fact that this site was haunted. He said that he's seen things and that it didn't really startle him that much anymore. We slowly began to imagine and wonder what the fuck he had seen or heard that scared the shit out of this guy. I mean, it must have been bad enough for him to be running back in a very hysterical manner. The lieutenant opens the door to the post that me and Mike are in, and we are both speechless and just staring at him while he catches his breath. After catching his breath, he tells us, "This is the last time that I will ever use the restrooms in the office building." I was taking a shit in the 3rd stall, and then I heard the restroom door swivel open. I thought it was one of you, so I simply ignored it. But the thing is, I did not hear any footsteps. I was listening to music, but I paused it to see if I could hear anything. A few seconds went by and nothing, and then I heard the water faucet go off by itself. Then, a few seconds later, the air dryer also went off. I finished my business and I ran back as fast as I could. because I knew it wasn't either of you in there. The creepier part about this is that both the water faucet and the hand dryer are both motion activated. So in order for them to have gone off, something must have triggered it. Before this incident, I was already skeptical about using that restroom alone. I hated taking shits at work during my night shift because I was always anticipating for something creepy like this to happen to me. The worst part is, when you're taking a shit, you're in a vulnerable position. Also, those restrooms are way too deep in the building, and it's pitch black inside. You would need a flashlight to go inside, and it's really quiet and creepy. Wow, that sounds like a truly creepy experience. It's understandable why your coworker was so startled and why you would be hesitant to use the restroom alone after hearing that story. The thought of being in such a vulnerable position, in a dimly lit and eerie restroom, only adds to the chilling atmosphere of the port. The lieutenant's encounter with the motion-activated water faucet and hand dryer is truly unsettling. What unseen force triggered these devices? What lurks within the depths of the office building? It's no wonder that the supernatural tales and hauntings surrounding this place have left an indelible mark on the security guards who work there. As the night continues and the darkness envelops the port, the security guards remain on high alert. Each shift brings the potential for another bone-chilling encounter, leaving them constantly on edge. Will they uncover the truth behind these paranormal occurrences? Or will they forever be trapped in a haunting cycle of fear and uncertainty? Only time will tell. Thank you for joining us for another spine, tingling tale from the port. Stay tuned for more terrifying experiences that will make your skin crawl and your heart race. Until then, sleep tight and remember to lock your doors. This is a long story, so sit back. To give you some background, I'm from a city in the northeast of Scotland in the UK. What happened here didn't just affect me, but also two close friends who, for the purposes of this story, we will call Debbie Joe. We all used to work for Virgin Megastore. I started there back in 2003. Debbie joined in 2006, and Joe joined us in 2007. The entire staff of the store, for the best part, were all close friends. We were all music and movie nerds, so shared the same interests and sense of humor, etc. Every year over the Christmas period, we would take on temporary staff as extra help for the volume of customers we would get at that time of year. In 2007, one of our temps was Rory. This is his real name. Most of us hit it off with him brilliantly. Young guy. Seemed really passionate about music, especially Pink Floyd, which was a big win with Joe, who is one of the greatest guitarists I've ever met, and myself, who grew up on Pink Floyd through my parents. Plus, Rory was a budding filmmaker, and his love of movies seemed to match his love of music, so we would have a lot to chat about and became friends very quickly. It was rare to keep in touch with the work temps post the Christmas period, but Rory was an exception. He didn't live in the same city as the rest of us, but kept plenty of contact through text and social media, and would come through to the city to hang out from time to time. Moving forward to Christmas time 2008, by this point, Virgin Megastore had become Zabby Entertainment. Remember them, and Rory came back to work with us as a temp, and particularly with me. I ran the stockroom in the store, which was the busiest place at Christmas time, and had a history of not great people to help for how much work would need done. So was happy to be getting someone I knew would work hard, and that I could have banter with. He could be a bit annoying, trying to force different live versions of the same Pink Floyd song he'd found on the internet. As I said, I love Pink Floyd, but I love a lot of music. Nevertheless, I just figured, he's young, and he's passionate, but he's cool around. This time he started to put together a self-made Pink Floyd documentary, which he interviewed me and Joe for. And to be honest, he did a fucking great job, given the limited tools that he had. Zabby closed in February 2009 due to the global credit crunch at the time. All the Zabby staff, and Rory kept in touch. We'd all become very close working there, like I said. Fast forward to summer 2010. We had a Zabby reunion night out, which Rory organized. Most of us that still lived in the same city managed to make it along. Joe had moved to Glasgow at this point, was a really fun night out, and Rory stayed at my place. Was preparing to go to America for his second year working as a camp counselor for Camp America at Camp Wigwam in Maine, Ohio. Since Zabby closed, I'd gotten a new job doing the same thing at another entertainment retail store in that Christmas. Rory came to work there as a temp, which I was admittedly fine with. Moving into 2011, and Rory starts to raise red flags, although at the time I didn't see it clearly. He claimed that while in America he'd gotten a job helping with editing and camera work on the show Burn Notice. At the time, I was like, oh wow, that's cool, man. Well done. It didn't seem unbelievable, given I knew he had talent in filmmaking. To coincide with this, he claimed he was working for Camp America in Florida, which is what led to him working on Burn Notice, where it was at that time filmed. Then when he was back in Scotland in 2011, it was time for another Zabby reunion, which Rory had to be in charge of. Which bothered me as he technically didn't work there when we closed. And like I said, was only a temp. I got sickened with him posting constantly on Facebook about essentially what was just some old friends going to the pub. Again, I was just like, yeah, he's young and easily excited. He's harmless though. Then another red flag was raised. Rory and another friend who shared an interest in filmmaking were talking about doing a film in the city. They spent the whole day looking at locations. And afterwards, when I spoke to Rory, he was like, yeah, we're going to do this. This and this, making it sound like they had some exciting ideas. Then when I spoke to my other friend about it, he told me all Rory did for the whole day was ask me about my favorite directors. It was a complete waste of time. Made me think, he's young and excitable and has a tendency to exaggerate, but he's harmless. Move into 2012 Debbie, who I mentioned at the start of this story, become a closer figure in his life. Debbie is a nearly 6'' tall blonde bombshell. At the time, one of the nicest people you could ever meet with an amazing sense of humor. We became super close when we worked together, but was always totally platonic. I always looked at her in a more sibling way. She would come around to my place for dinner and to watch movies, and I knew all her close friends and a few family members. Herself and Rory went to the cinema a few times and hung out afterwards. Absolutely nothing wrong with that. Move on to Christmas time. Rory back as a temp for the third year in a row, and by this time he has started to annoy the other staff. Whilst on lunch, he'd sit and brag about all the TV shows he worked on during his summers in the States. Burn Notice, Criminal Minds, and The Wire. Unfortunately, I didn't hear about this at the time, because people knew I was friendly with him. They didn't want to seem like they were talking shit about him. Us, the staff in this job, also all got along famously. On a personal note, talking with him at work became a bit weird. He started talking to me in a really smug, condescending tone, which, given that I'm 6 years older than the dude and had a hand in him getting his temp jobs every year, and thought I was his friend, didn't appreciate it. Then, around this same time, there's another Zabby night out. Rory, Debbie, Joe, who was visiting from Glasgow, myself, and a few others. The day before the said get-together. Keeping in mind I'm pissed about how Rory is behaving, I get a text from him saying, hey, man, the plan for the night out tomorrow is to go to a pub quiz. Your favorite. Now, I don't go to pub quizzes for tedious personal reasons, and all these friends knew this. So Rory was essentially implying the rest of the guys had planned to go to something I wouldn't go to, which I didn't, as I was super pissed about that text. I kept quiet about it from the others, even though I should have shown how devious he was, because as it turns out, those guys didn't go to a pub quiz, and there was no intention to. The next day, Joe comes into the shop to speak to me since I'd missed the night out. Whole time, I'm talking to him, Rory is standing next to him in a defensive stance. answering everything I asked Joe, like he was his fucking spokesperson. Which was infuriating, because I was at work. I couldn't lose. My shit, and Joe is happy-go-lucky he didn't even notice what Rory was doing. Rory was obsessed with Joe because of his talents as a guitar player, to the points of it becoming unhealthy. It was around this time that Debbie started to sense I was having a problem with Rory, and it was true. Contact with him would trigger me to get anxious or angry, because I knew there was something amiss. But Debbie and Joe were constantly just fooled by his false charm, and that's why I kept tolerating him, because I loved those guys and didn't want to be the cause of drama. In early 2013, Rory makes out his dad has life-threatening stroke, which he survives, but leaves him incredibly disabled. This subsequently turns out to be a lie and a tool to get sympathy from Debbie Joe. Moving forward to 2014, Joe moves back to town from Glasgow into Debbie's spare room, and this is where Rory really starts to phase me out from the group, despite having recently hung out with me and me having put him up at my place, which I had done several times over the years at this point. He takes Debbie, Joe, and another ex-Zavvi friend to 3 different price gigs around the country. In Italy, I was super pissed, but in hindsight, am relieved. It was Rory that paid for all the tickets for those gigs, which was another red flag. Have to point out that when he wasn't working with me as a temp over Christmas or in America, over the summer working for Camp America and various TV shows, he was making out he was freelance photographer and video editor, which would be fine, but he didn't have a website, a Facebook page, or anything else as far as I could see to contact him to do said work. Taking that into account and the fact he's throwing cash to go to concerts around the UK, I was concerned about where his money was coming from. Following the Prince gigs, I had blocked him on social media, as his posts and comments on other people's posts were just annoying, constantly undermining people on what they're saying or arguing with folks having a different opinion to him. Debbie took issue with me blocking him and stuck up for him. With hindsight, she'd been groomed by him and had rose-tinted glasses on when looking at him. I caved and got back in touch with him, even though I know now I should have walked away from them all. But like I said before, I dearly loved Debbie, Joe, and didn't want to lose their friendship, even though I knew deep down there was something bad about Rory. Throughout 2014, Debbie Rory got super close. Anyone that didn't know them seeing Facebook pics would think they were a couple. Over the next 2 years, my contact with these guys started to drift. Rory would come round to my place for a bit, and then when leaving Be Like Him away up to darling Debbie's. I would invite you, but you're not one of the 3 amigos. A lot of the time he wasn't actually going there. It would turn out. He even came to my place to stay the night once, saying he needed to catch a flight to the States in the morning to a video editing job. Then it would turn out he was just going back to the village he lived in at his mom's house. Eventually, I walked away. Quietly. I took Debbie, Joe, Rory off of newsfeed and hid any Facebook posts I made hidden from them. I figured if I see any of them in the street, I'll be polite and just get away ASAP. I started to investigate Rory claims about his time in America. I relayed them all to a friend and his flatmate, who himself had lived in America for a long time. They both told me, nah man, there's no way he could be doing all that shit. Which is true. If you go to America to work for Camp America, that's all you're allowed to do. And with a bit of research, I found the camp Rory actually worked at, proving he never did Camp America work in Florida. During this time, I had friends who would still follow him on Facebook, out of intrigue. They would ask me, where is his money coming from? Rory was going to stadium and arena concerts around the UK at least once a week. Some of these gigs cost as much as $200 a ticket, not to mention travel costs and accommodation. I knew something was up. I knew he wasn't involved in drugs. He would claim he made money from YouTube, but his channel barely had any subscriptions, and plus all his vids were of copyrighted material, so there was no way he was making money that way. I did wonder if he was making money from editing. He was avoiding paying tax, That's the only thing I could think of. Believe me, if I could have afforded a private detective to investigate this guy, I would have. During all this time, Debbie Joe are hanging out with and posting how great he is, etc. on Facebook, despite the fact I found Rory had a second Facebook account where the profile pic was of him. This was a secret account, and I took a screenshot and showed Debbie. But she was just like, "Oh, isn't that his American account? Sorry, Debbie, but you were really fucking stupid." Now, let's fast forward to October 2018. By this point, I've severed contact with Rory completely. Missed Debbie wedding the previous year, where Rory was a bride's. Man, haven't seen Joe in a good while either. I'm back at work after lunch for about 5 minutes. Then my friend who is on her lunch and in the staff room comes running through to where I am. Hey, have you heard Rory was in court? Which in itself was initially shocking. I was like, what for tax evasion or copyright infringement? No, she said. Between January and November 2017, he was pretending to be a girl online using YouTube Omegle to groom young boys. I shall leave links to newspaper reports. Once I was told what he'd done, I was in an adrenaline-fueled rage for the next 17 hours. Just so pissed off that I'd been right. He was a bad guy, but I just couldn't prove it. I knew my friends had been duped, not to mention all those poor kids that got abused by him. As for his expendable income, I really think he was selling the videos he was making on the dark web for Bitcoin profit. He was the first person ever to mention the dark net to me, but in a way of like, oh, never go to the dark net. He pleaded guilty and got 3 years and 9 months, along with a 5-year sexual harm prevention order, and will be on the sex offenders register for the rest of his life. Thanks for listening. I'm still in touch with Joe. All thought he's a super busy guy these days. Debbie, unfortunately, I'm not in touch with now. I know she was mortified by the revelations, but she's married and happy. So I'm just glad she saw the truth eventually, even though it took something so heinous to do so.